All right, we are live and I see the attendees streaming in. I'm just going to wait for a minute before I start with the introductions. Let everyone come in. It takes a moment for Zoom to connect. We are already at 100 plus attendees now. And let's wait for another 15-20 seconds before we start. In the meanwhile, people who have joined in, the attendees who have dialed in already, I see Kushagra, Shreya, Aranya, quite a few of you who have come in. Why don't you mention your cities, right? Which city you're dialing in from? Just mention that in the chat box. It would be great to get a feel of where all you're coming in from. Okay, I see Agra, Madhya Pradesh, Delhi. Faizan is from Srinagar. All right, Madhuri is dialing in from Nagpur. All right, this is going too fast. I can't read out everyone's cities, but interesting to see the diversity. Okay, I see someone from Assam. Janvi is dialing in from Chandigarh. Interesting. All right, I'm gonna wait for another 5-10 seconds. The count is going up. I see the attendees streaming in, but I just want to give them a minute for everyone to dial in and not miss out on this very interesting topic that we have today. All right, I see Kiran is dialing in from Assam. I see someone from Suratgarh. Okay, I see one more person from Assam. All right, so great. We have audience quite literally from all over the country. It's really great to see that. Now, let me start with the quick introductions and then we'll discuss further. So good evening, everyone. My name is Sanjay Dhingra. I'm a co-founder and director at Seed Global Education, the firm which is hosting today's session. I have the honor of hosting Professor Mudit, Kapoor, and Mr. Narottam Kishore, who's also on the panel. Okay, and there we see him now. So I have the honor of hosting both of them. But before we get into the session and start discussing on the topic we have, I want to, I still know people are dialing in. So before everyone dials in and misses out on everything, I want to run a quick poll to get a feel of, the kind of audience that we have in today's session. So the poll is going to go live on your screen right now in a moment. And okay, great. You'll be able to see the poll on your screen right now, which asks you, which is your target year of postgraduate study start? So I understand a majority of you who are dialing it today are pursuing your undergraduate education or may have just completed your education and been jobs very recently. So we want to get a feel of the year in which you intend to start your master's education. So when do you intend to start your postgraduate education? So is it 2022? Are you looking at the next year's intake? Are you looking at the 2023 intake? Or are you looking at 2024 or later? I'm going to keep this poll open for another 10 to 15 seconds. So it would be great if you can quickly respond to this poll and we'll see the results as well. So please do let us know which year do you intend to start your master's education. All right, last 5 seconds to go. So if you haven't responded, please do so now. Please do let us know which year you intend to start your master's education. All right, great. Let's end the poll now, and let's have a quick look at the results as well. All right, so we are seeing around 26% of you are looking at the next year's intake, some 30% looking at 2023, and the remaining 43% are looking at 2024 or later. Very interesting. All right, great. So let me start with the formal introductions now. So as I said, my name is Sanjay Dhingra. I'm a co-founder and director at Seed Global Education. I have the pleasure of hosting Professor Mudit Kapoor and Narottam Kishore to talk about their profiles. Professor Kapoor is a visiting professor of economics at the BITS School of Management. It's a new business school which has been set up in Mumbai, so they have a campus in Mumbai. Now, the BITS School of Management comes from the pedigree of BITS Pilani. So the BITS Pilani group of institutions, the engineering school, which has a campus in Pilani, Rajasthan, Goa, Hyderabad, and also in Dubai. So it comes from their pedigree. And of course, it's backed by the Aditya Birla Group as well. Now, Professor Kapoor in the past, he's also in the past has been a professor, associate professor of economics at the Indian School of Business, from where Narottam and I both are alumni of ISB Hyderabad. So Professor Kapoor was the associate professor at ISB prior to this. And I have the pleasure of hosting him for this particular session. And Narottam Kishore heads admissions at the BITS School of Management, so BITSoM, and we'll hear from him eventually as well. But for now, I would hand it over to Professor Kapoor to tell us how globalization caused the 2009 financial crisis. Very interesting topic. It was a major upheaval in the world of economics, in the financial world across the globe. And it would be very interesting to see how globalization caused that. So, Professor Kapoor, over to you.
Good evening. Very warm welcome to all of you. I just want to make sure that I'm audible. Sanjay, can you hear me? Narottam?
Yes, loud and clear.
Perfect. A very, very warm welcome. And I must admit that I have not had an audience of more than 30 to 40 people. Maybe in my ISB days, there were 70 students maximum, but talking to 400 plus students or prospective students is very interesting. So the topic I chose was the financial crisis, or I would say the economic crisis in 2007 and 9, because its effects are being felt even today, and some of the issues that we discussed almost a decade ago are still relevant today. I mean, if you look at, for example, the US economy, just yesterday, they have passed one of the largest infrastructure budget, more than $1 trillion they would be investing. Now, of course, a large part of it is being driven by COVID and the after effects of COVID, but it's also, I believe what's responsible for it also is the crisis that took place and its after effects. Now, in the Indian setting also, it becomes extremely relevant because post the financial crisis, Indian economy didn't suffer that much. But post 2012, Indian economy did, in terms of growth slowdown, in terms of private investment, there was a slowdown, a significant slowdown. And part of it can be attributed to the global crisis itself. Part of it has to be attributed also to the domestic policies that we had pursued, particularly post 2012, when we fiscalized the banking sector. And unfortunately, that resulted in a major non-performing asset crisis in the banking sector in India. And we didn't fully recover from it when India was hit by COVID. And, it's now we are expecting, at least in some states, to go back to the pre-COVID days. But many of you might not be aware that this crisis also was a watershed moment in the study of economics itself. And let me sort of elaborate what I mean by it. You see, a fundamental question that emerged post-crisis was, and this was asked, I believe, by the Queen of England, when she was visiting the London School of Economics, she asked a very simple question. How is it that so many smart economists could not figure out that there was a crisis coming? I mean, what is it about this crisis that none of you had any idea or saw it coming? So how did this crisis happen? And I, along with my colleagues, one is a professor at Northwestern, the other works in the Federal Reserve, we asked a similar question way back when the crisis was unfolding, that what is actually leading to this crisis? And we sort of zeroed down on globalization, but more importantly on rise of China in the world economy. And let me sort of take you back to some of the issues prior to the crisis to understand how the crisis unfolded. And the reason why, both from a practical perspective and an academic perspective, this crisis is a watershed moment because it hits at the very foundation of what economics is all about, the study of economics. Unfortunately, when people think about academic economics, they think of model, they think of maths. But if you ask me honestly, economics essentially is about narratives. It's not mathematics. It's actually ideas. It's about ideology. It's about narration. more than anything else, it's also about history. It also incorporates to a certain extent, a philosophical view of how the world operates. And it has implications which sort of are not felt immediately, but they accumulate over a period of time, and over the due course, these are felt. And let me give you just a flavor of it. Till 2007, it was largely believed in the developed part of the world that most of the problems associated with institutions are solved. Markets work efficiently. We need to deregulate the financial sector. Once the financial sector is deregulated, then we will have more economic growth, more economic opportunities, not only domestically, but globally. This was the thinking from 1970s onwards. In fact, if you hear the Federal Reserve chairman at that point in time, when he was asked, why didn't you see the crisis coming? He said, well, we all thought that markets work very efficiently, right? So there was nothing for the regulators to do as such, right? The markets will do the job of growth, creating opportunities, creating jobs, providing opportunities both for high-income households and low-income households. The only thing regulators need to ensure is that the markets actually work, right? And this view sort of emerged from 1970 onwards. This idea sort of emerged, and this idea was backed by the regulators till the time this emerged in the form of a crisis, right, in 2007, because this 2007 crisis was primarily a crisis which was the outcome of deregulation of the financial sector, right? So in some sense, this crisis was an outcome of an ideology that was pursued by policymakers all over the world. And some of the real events that were taking place were not factored in the thought process, at least among the economists and the regulators. And to understand this, we need to go back in some sense and incorporate political economy, political science into our thought process. So broadly in economics, there are two sort of ideologies in economics, right? And these are very, very broad, right? One is that government intervention in the economy should be minimal as possible. And we should give an opportunity for the markets to work, deregulate as much as possible, have a very minimal role for the government. So if you think of it, even when politicians talk about minimum government, maximum governance, right? In some sense, there is an idea that markets will work, governments need to sort of deregulate and have a minimal role to play. And the other school of the thought was that markets don't work very efficiently, right? And this idea was sort of promoted in the background of the Great Depression that took place almost 90 years ago in 1930s, when there was massive unemployment rates were as high as 25% in America. All over the world, there was a major crisis. At that point in time, an economist came along, John Maynard Keynes, who argued that market systems don't work very well. So in some sense, he was arguing that markets don't work very well, which means that demand and supply don't sort of always intersect with each other for the economy to be able to provide jobs, for the economy to be able to employ everyone, for the economy to be able to consume whatever people produce, right? And what Keynes was arguing from an ideological perspective, of course, he did use some empirical evidence and some mathematical modeling, but his argument was essentially seeped in the fact that, look, the moment you have markets not clearing, there is a lot of uncertainty that is set in. And if the effective demand is not equal to the supply in the economy, that means the amount of goods that are demanded in the economy is less than what the economy is producing, then you're going to have a depression in the economy, right? I mean, by depression, what I mean essentially is that there will be unemployment. There will be prices would be in a downward spiral. Profitability of firms would go down. Investment opportunities would go down. And unfortunately, the economy will be in a major slump. So he argued, in contrast to what was the thinking at that point in time, that in contrast that government should not intervene, he argued that the government actually needs to intervene. Government needs to come in, boost demand, and essentially revive the animal spirits in the economy for the economy to flourish. And his argument was actually interesting, because what he was arguing essentially was that the government plays a very central role in the economy. It's not simply a sort of a referee in the market economy, but it actively provides for employment. It actually invests in the economy. It consumes in the economy in a big way to revive the animal spirits. And this argument was sort of revolutionary, because till then, economists had not thought very deeply about what was the role of the government, right? So, and this took a long, you'll be surprised to know that these ideas, which we sort of accept today, took a long time for the regulators and the general public to accept. And it was accepted. And it took almost a decade for the economy to revive. And also during that period of time, it must be mentioned that some of the early adopters of his policy, where the government needs to invest, was actually in the Nazi Germany, when they started investing in the military-industrial complex. So the government's role in the economy was sort of extremely important. And this thought process continued till the 1970s. And in the 1970s, essentially, we then, when the government was started investing, what happened essentially was that government then saw investments or its own expenditure as an instrument by which it could generate growth and employment. So government started overspending, if you wish to think of it. And eventually this led to a situation of output stagnation and inflation in the economy. This was called stagflation. And once again, Keynes' view was challenged in the real world, that look, what worked, for 30, 40 years, now was no longer working. The economy in the 1970s, due to oil price shock and other shocks that came in quick succession, we were faced with a situation where you had output stagnation and inflation in the economy. And then a new breed of economists came, and they started talking about rational expectations. They started talking about the markets. You could think of this school of thought was the neoclassical school of thought, which argued basically that it is the government that has created this crisis. So what we need is to revive the animal spirits. We need to reduce the size of the government. Now, this was the overwhelming thought process. And this was what, by and large, regulators sort of accepted, that they need to sort of reduce the size of the government. But in the 1970s, another event that was taking place, that was sort of a minor event, if you wish to think of it, but it would play a very important role in the future, which was in early 1970s, we had basically a relationship began to emerge between China and the US. US sort of warmed up, recognized the People's Republic of China, and we see a very, very famous meeting between Mao and Richard Nixon taking place. And I believe it was facilitated, interestingly, by Pakistan. Now, why I call this an important event, even at that point in time, was the integration of China in the world economy. In some sense, that is the moment when a Western country was sort of formally recognizing China. But at that point in time, the Chinese economy was not so integrated into the world economy or the global economy. But that was the first step, if you wish to think of it. And then what happened in the 1970s when the world was discussing deregulation in China, we also saw a change of leadership, which is when Mao passed away, then Deng Xiaoping came to power. And that again was, I would imagine, a watershed moment, at least globally, because Deng's view of the economy was very different from Mao. Deng, decided at that point in time, or at least he started experimenting through trial and error process to sort of introduce market economy into China. And in 1970s, you would be surprised to know the Chinese per capita income and India's per capita income were not very different. Now, at that point in time, if you recall, in 1970s, India was going a different way, where the rest of the world was talking about deregulation. We were actually nationalizing our banking sector. Airlines had got nationalized. Coca-Cola and others were basically also, in some sense, they were handed over to Indian companies. So India at that point in time was going in a different direction as compared to where the world and China was going. Now, of course, in China, there was a trial and error process happening in terms of introducing the market economy, sort of allowing once again to sort of, there's a very famous sort of a line by Deng Xiaoping, it doesn't matter what is the color of the cat as long as it catches the mice. So basically, the objective was that the economy needs to grow. We need to figure out what are the appropriate rules and regulations necessary. And one of the ideas that struck at the leadership, at least the Chinese leadership, was that they needed to sort of deregulate, which meant that they needed to reduce the size or the role of the government in the economy and allow the private sector to flourish. Now, this was a challenge over there because under the communist or the socialist regime, people are not allowed property ownership, right? So this was sort of a very major shift in some sense to allow people or to encourage a philosophy where you tell people that it's all right to make money, it's all right to become rich. And this happened over a period of 10 years. And I believe in the early 1990s, the Chinese economy then began to embrace, at a large scale, it began to embrace the market process, the market forces. We saw the private sector beginning to emerge in China. Now, at that point in time, the Chinese economy was still very, very small, right? But nevertheless, the seeds of a market economy were sort of planted. And what we saw next in the next decade was the emergence of the Chinese entrepreneurship. Now, 1990s, India also liberalized its economy. We were faced with a major crisis in 1991, and we had no choice at that point in time because we owed money to IMF. IMF was willing to bail us out, and IMF put certain conditions to deregulate the economy, to get rid of the license Raj, to allow devaluation of the rupee, and Indian government had very limited choice in that matter, and we had to sort of deregulate the economy, which we sort of consider 91 as the turning point in the Indian economy, where privatization was encouraged. But just want to sort of correct one thing, that it was in the mid-1980s, actually, when India had started on the process of liberalization, but it was actually in the 1990s, early 90s, when this began to sort of get full steam. Now, why I'm saying that these events are extremely important is, particularly the rise of China is important because today China has become a major player in the global economy. Imagine a country whose per capita income was slightly lower than India in the 1990s. In our lifetime itself, its per capita income is 4 to 5 times that of India, right? And today it is the second largest economy in the world, and its growth rate is unprecedented. But China's growth, one has to keep in mind, was happening due to some of the technological innovations that were taking place. And one of the big technological innovation that was taking place was that the manufacturing sector, which was located primarily, let's say, in the Western countries, primarily the US, could now be relocated to a country like China. And with improvements in the shipping technology, with improvements in transport and logistics, then goods would be cheaply produced, manufactured in China, and they would be produced for the global market. Right. So these technological innovations were also taking place at the same time. And what we saw in a very, very short period of time, manufacturing shift from the Western countries, and they shifted to China at a very, very rapid pace. Just to put some numbers to it, it's believed that in the last 20 years, from 1990 to 2010, China had added almost 300 million people to its urban labor force. I mean, this is the entire labor force of the OECD countries. So you can imagine that in 20 years, the number of people that were working in urban areas in these manufacturing sector, which was producing for the global market, this was at a scale that the world has never seen, right? So, and we're not talking about a small country growing. We're talking about a billion plus, a country with more than a billion people. So this is not some small country like South Korea, which grew over a period of time, or Japan, which is not a small country, but certainly it's smaller than China, which grew post-World War II. I mean, of course, Japanese economy was well developed before World War II, but once again, there were apprehension. Its economy grew rapidly post-World War II as well. But China, the growth of China was unprecedented because this happened in a very short period of time, and this happened extremely peacefully. Now, how did all this lead to the financial crisis? So recall I talked about deregulation of the financial sector, opening up of China, and China beginning to produce at the global scale for the world markets. Now, unfortunately, what this was doing was, as the Chinese economy was growing, China started producing at the global level, right? So it started producing, for example, in labor-intensive sector, it was producing shirts, trousers, machines, components of computers were being manufactured or assembled in China. As a result of it, there was demand for global demand for Chinese goods went up. Now, if the world economy was operating, if the markets were functioning very well, then this would have resulted in demand for the Chinese currency, causing the Chinese currency to appreciate. But China had understood from the Asian crisis in the 1990s that it had to accumulate, to provide macroeconomic stability, it had to have a large reserve of US dollars. So what China started doing was it sort of prevented the appreciation of the Chinese currency, and it started accumulating the US debt. So now you have US, which is sort of buying from China. Its deficit with China is going up. China is manipulating the currency markets, preventing the appreciation of the currency from happening. And what China was basically doing with all these dollars with which the US economy was purchasing its goods and services, and of course, not only the US, but Europe as well, I mean, all over the world, which it was purchasing, it was basically using that to build its dollar reserves. So in some sense, the Chinese were supplying to the world, but at the same time, Chinese, due to manipulation of its currency, was not expanding its own domestic demand, right? So as a result, globally, people were buying Chinese goods, but China was not buying goods from the global markets. Now, this created a sort of an imbalance in the economy, because what would the Chinese do with these dollars? So they started purchasing US debt, right? So now imagine you have a situation where everybody is willing to purchase US debt, which means banks in the US had a lot of money with them and they did not know what to do with that money. So you have Chinese who are forcefully saving. You have the US because they are purchasing cheap goods from China, consuming. So now you have this imbalance that you have a large saver you have a large consumer, and you have large amount of resources in the US banking sector. Unfortunately, this money went into the housing sector. So you had a lot of savings that went into the housing sector in the US. And what happened as a result of it was that we saw a lot of money getting into the US economy, primarily the housing sector. Now, housing is a consumption good. We consume housing. I mean, we think of houses as an investment, but if you think of it for a moment, it basically is a consumption good. You stay in a house, you consume, it depreciates over a period of time, you have to keep fixing it up, right? But then when you had large amount of money going into the housing sector, people started refinancing their homes, mortgages were refinanced, and basically the moment the value of the house went up, banks would go to the guys and say, hey, look, the value of your house has gone up. Would you like to take out a loan? Somebody would say, yes, I would need a loan. Give me a loan. With that loan, they would go around and they would go spend it once again. Consumption would go up. And what are they consuming on? Once again, on Chinese goods. So this cycle happened for a very long period of time, as a result of which the economy began to heat up. But then the banking sector and these financial institutions like Lehman Brothers and others were basically sort of playing, they had this, they were converting basically the money they had, and they were trying to securitize the asset. The asset in this case was the houses in the US economy, and of course, to a small extent in Europe as well. So now you had this unbelievable sort of a cycle happening at the global level. Chinese are saving, sending their money to the US. US banks have a lot of money. They don't know what to do with it. They are putting it in the housing sector. The government is also encouraging this because the government believes that everybody should own a house in the US. And when money started going into the housing sector, people started refinancing their houses, started taking out loans for whatever equity was being built up, and further started basically consuming, over-consuming much more than what their productivity had gone up, their level of productivity, right? So imagine you own an asset whose value goes up. You go to the bank and say, hey, I have this asset, its value has gone up. Can you give me a loan? Now, everything goes well in this, right? I mean, everything is fine till the time the value of your house or the housing prices are going up. Unfortunately, in 2007, what happened was that people started defaulting in their loans. And defaults might be small, but it completely began to change the perception in the housing sector that, look, this asset, this money that has been lent in lieu of this asset is not as stable as people have thought out to be. And as a result of it, what we saw was that we had a major housing crisis in the US. Prices crashed. And once prices crashed, the value of the housing declined. And as a result of which, consumption declined at a massive level. And what do we have? We have, unfortunately, one of the largest crises in the modern era, where unemployment rate shot up. Why? Because suddenly when the banking sector sort of is faced with a crisis, then unfortunately liquidity in the market suffers. And if the liquidity suffers in the market, then even firms that are viable are not able to raise money. And as a result of which there was a crash, economy crashed, unemployment went up. Now, at that point in time, our own research was sort of not taken very seriously for the simple reason we sort of provided the institutional reason why the crisis happened. We believe everybody, when the housing crisis happened, everybody thought that it's simply a financial crisis. The central bank will step in, provide liquidity to the banks, and the crisis would be taken care of. Unfortunately, we believe that this crisis cannot be taken care of by financial instruments alone, because there was a major institutional change that had taken place. And that institutional change was the rise of China in the global economy. Now, why that institutional change matters? Because as the manufacturing sector was growing in China, unfortunately, it came at the expense of decline in the manufacturing sector and jobs in the US. Now, many of us, for example, when we think of macroeconomic and trade models, we think that, look, globally, everybody gains. But from a political perspective, we have very distinct winners and losers in the economy. Now, we economists tend to believe that those people who lose out due to globalization should be taken care of in the future because trade will uplift everybody. But that does not necessarily happen. So, for example, if you have developed a skill to be a welder, let us say, and suddenly that job goes to China or elsewhere, then naturally questions would be raised because, what do you do now with yourself? Now, we economists would say, well, go get yourself in training in those sectors which are demanded. But that's not how it actually happens, right? So as a result of it, what we saw of these subtle changes that were taking place manifested themselves in the global financial crisis and also had political implications because people who lost out due to globalization were politically still very active. They started demanding that why is it that we have to pay the price for everybody else's benefit? And as a result of which, we saw, again, in the US, for example, it's the political implications of the financial crisis manifested itself in the 2016 elections when politicians started talking about making America great again, right? So there was this this globalization event was not only about the financial crisis, but also it has created upheaval because you had a social crisis, because when jobs relocated, then naturally it would have social implications and political implications as well. Now, in India, also, we had somewhat a similar crisis, but of slightly different nature. But the underlying process was the same. Now, if you notice in the Indian economy, we too were subjected to the global economy. When the global financial crisis happened, India too, to a certain extent, was a victim of it because global demand declined drastically. So naturally, the export sector would suffer. If investment outlook become negative, then naturally private investments in the country would also go down. In 2012, what we noticed in the Indian economy was, at least some of the events began to happen earlier, 2009 and 10, that in India, for example, we started seeing a very interesting phenomena taking place, which is that the Indian economy was not growing as rapidly as economists wanted it to grow, particularly in UPA2, there was a growth slowdown. Situations regarding jobs had become relatively serious. Now, unfortunately, in India, we also have what is called the Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act, which is that the government cannot go and spend its way, right? There is a certain limit in how much the government can spend as a percentage of GDP. So I believe what happened then in India was the fiscalization, right? So when government spends money, that is called a fiscal policy. What we saw in India in 2011 and 12 was the fiscalization of the banking sector. What fiscalization of the banking sector meant was that some of the private sectors in the economy, due to outlandish valuations and growth prospects, were given large sums of money by the banking sector. Now, in some sense, I believe if I were to read the former governor's book a little more closely, it seems that that policy was encouraged by the government. Now, the government basically was telling the private sector that, look, raise as much money as you want for the projects that you have. Don't worry about the interest rates. Interest rates were low, subsidized loans were given. You just go out and create jobs, right? Now, unfortunately, when you allow or deregulate the banking sector or give loans based on fanciful growth where there's limited oversight, what happened was that people started investing in sectors, particularly real estate, which unfortunately were based on very, very outlandish valuation. Right, so you can see, just go beyond Greater Noida, and you will see that some of the investments that were made in the future that the future growth in the economy would be double-digit growth for the next decade or so, we see some of the results of those bad investments are evident. You need to just step outside Delhi and you will see those bad investments. But this fiscalization of the banking sector unfortunately resulted in one of the biggest banking crises in the country, which was in 2015, when we saw the non-performing assets became a huge problem in the Indian economy. Now, why is non-performing assets of the banking sector an important issue for the economy and job creation? Simply, when the banking sector has large number of these non-performing assets, then its ability to provide credit, even to the viable businesses, becomes extremely difficult because they have to put a very large amount of capital has to be provisioned for the non-performing assets, because that money was a significant amount of money that has grown to a very, very large unmanageable number. In fact, the infrastructure minister has basically raised this question that it's very difficult to finance even infrastructure projects which are extremely viable because of this huge non-performing asset crisis that one is subjected to. Now, unfortunately, in the Indian economy, we are seeing shoots of revival in the Indian economy, but the rot in the banking structure, particularly the public banking sector, it's a bit deeper than what one had imagined it to be. Unfortunately, it requires reforms. We need banking sector reforms. The private sector, some of the banks did suffer, right? So, but private sector banks have done relatively well compared to the public sector banks. That is because of the fiscalization that has happened. Now, unfortunately, in India, we sort of have not been able to fully recover from some of the bad policies that were being followed. And when you fiscalize the banking sector, when a lot of money was being pumped into the economy in the early 2010s, unfortunately, that also resulted in huge amount of inflation. Now, it was also not helped because during that period, the government was accused also of major corrupt practices, right? So we remember, I don't know if you recall, prior to 2014, there were major issues with corruption which the government was faced with. And unfortunately, that created a negative investment environment in India. And as a result of which, it takes a long time to convince the markets to invest in India. Unfortunately, COVID has not helped. Our economy has suffered. We've had a very, very large shrinkage in the economy compared to the rest of the world. Some states have recovered, but due credit must be given to the government that some of its programs, particularly poverty programs to help out the poor, have sort of delivered in areas which are extremely poor, which were subjected to the lockdowns, at least the first lockdown that happened. But as far as the Indian economy is concerned, we are, trying to now, there is a thought process that we need to reform the economy, and the economy needs structural reform. So you might have noticed that the government, for example, is denationalizing Air India. Air India has been privatized. I call it denationalization as well because it was nationalized earlier. Denationalization. And it's not about Air India, but it's also to showcase the intent of the Indian government that it is willing to look at the private sector as a partner. It is willing to look at the private sector to provide growth and job opportunities in the future. So I'm going to stop here and sort of, I wish I had a longer time to discuss, but what I wanted to highlight was that when we discuss economics, we typically do, as economists, focus a great deal on mathematical models and graphs and charts, but we forget the political events, technological forces and processes that are at work that sort of remain undercurrent, but its effects are felt as they accumulate over a period of time. 2007 financial crisis was an accumulation of political process, historical process that had begun to take shape in the 1970s, right? In India, I know we are a bit restless with government reforms, but one will have to wait for a certain period of time for these reforms to kick in and have an effect on the economy. We have to wait. Some of these structural reforms, like the banking sector reform, the bankruptcy code, the emphasis on digitization, the emphasis on monetizing the unused assets of the government are, in my opinion, reforms that over a period of time will have a very positive impact on the Indian economy. But one has to keep in mind that, again, there are other political forces now that are at work. For example, China's rise was not only economics, but now there is a political rise of China, and it's right in our neighborhood, right? So we have, for example, political issues that we need to settle with China, because it's grown to a very, very large economy, both economically, but also politically. It is a global player. It has become a global power. And these currents would be felt domestically. They already are being felt. But I think Indian economy has no choice but to reform and grow if it has to meet a growing global power in our neighborhood. Then we have no choice but to grow both economically. And once we grow economically, then the political and the social powers that come with it are actually, they will play a very, very instrumental role in the future. So I'm going to stop here, and I'll be happy to take any questions. I've gone, I guess, by 2 minutes, if you pardon me, Sanjay, but I can wait for 2 minutes longer if needed.
Awesome. So we'll take, I have 4 interesting questions which have come up, so I'm going to try to take all 4 of those. I know you do a lot of research, you're involved in conducting, you do a lot of data analytics, research to identify areas and offshoots and future problems that may emerge as well. And sometimes that data may predict future trends as well. So right now, if you have a stance on this, what, according to you, are the 3 biggest risks for the Indian economy going forward? This question was asked by Chairman. It's in the Q&A box. So I'm just rephrasing that and asking you, according to you, what are the 3 biggest risks for the Indian economy in the near future? If you have an opinion on these. Yep.
Yeah. I think, I wouldn't say 3 important sectors in the Indian economy. The Indian economy rests a great deal on the financial sector reforms. You see, at the end of the day, the biggest risk, in globalization, as we have seen it repeatedly, is the financial sector. Right now, there is an impression that is created that there is a lot of liquidity available. You look at startups and unicorn, but I'm not talking about just a few companies which have a valuation of $1 billion receiving lots of money. We have to make the financial sector robust enough to be able to provide entrepreneurs with reasonably good, cheap, reliable finance at the tier 2, tier 3 city levels, where you have a lot of small and micro entrepreneurs who don't have access to the formal financial sector. But providing access to these guys also poses a risk, because how do you assess which businesses are viable and which businesses are not? Now, digitization is helping us in identifying that, but we have a very long way to go. Even in China, if you think of it, the biggest threat to the Chinese economy right now is the financial sector. You have these large companies that have taken large amounts of money from the banking sector, from the financial sector, and there's a fear that these companies might actually go bust, right? And that can have a major, major upheaval in the financial sector. So I think financial sector reforms are extremely important. We have to make our financial sector viable. That does not mean completely deregulating it, but what we need are smart regulations. We need to monitor the risk carefully. Now, second risk, which I see essentially, if you ask me, again, is related to the financial sector, is something which I don't understand, but it's becoming a fad. It's becoming a phenomena that we need to worry about. That is cryptocurrency. Now, why do I see that? You see, money at the end of the day is something which governments historically have always controlled, right? So whether we look at sophisticated financial institutions of today, or we go back to the Roman Empire and the Greek Empire, it is the government that has controlled the value of money, the value of currency. Now, to completely deregulate and democratize that, right? You have a medium of exchange, a store of value that is completely sort of democratized, where nobody controls it, right? And if nobody controls it, if it's completely free, then nobody is free, right? So then the implications it will have. Right now, it is very small compared to the global transactions that takes place in traditional economy, right? It's a small fraction of the total global transactions in the world. But once it achieves a certain critical status, right, we will have to worry about it, because I believe some academic has said, and I think it was Taleb who said, that it has all the virtues, it has all the vices of vices of gold, but none of its virtue, right? So if you have people sort of dealing in a currency which nobody understands how its value, how it is created, and we leave it to some kind of artificial intelligence or machine learning to produce this, I think I wouldn't right now trust a machine to regulate the economy, because at the end of the day, machine takes instructions from some humans, and to leave it to this sort of creates a certain uncertainty. It's not something which is very easily understood. So these two, I mean, one is a risk which is very clear. The other is a risk which is emerging because we don't know what the future in terms of the global transaction would be like, right? So that is something which causes a little bit of concern. Government does talk about regulating cryptocurrency. I'm not very certain that they have fully understood that what is it that they can actually regulate. So if, for example, I today go to BITSoM and say, guys, pay me in crypto, if they do have some cryptocurrency available and if I'm accepting it, and if the government cannot trace those transactions to me, then I don't know what is it that they can actually regulate, right? So my fears are centered around these two, because I believe money has been a source of crisis, right? Whenever it's historically been a source of crisis, global crisis. Previously, it was gold. Now, the future crisis could be outcomes of something which is not very well understood, which is cryptocurrency. So I think it's the crisis. In my opinion, it's very real, because it is something we don't understand. It's growing exponentially. It will take a while for traditional money to be substituted by this, but it's only a function of people's acceptability of the currency, where the switch can happen very suddenly and quickly. And what might seem very small might become a problem in the future if we don't think hard about it today.
Fair. I'm not going to ask you for your recommendation on whether to buy or not buy cryptocurrency. So that's a separate thing. We're not going to ask you about that. But I want to take this question from Madhuri, and it's a very interesting and detailed question. The basic question is about the China impact, right? We know it's become the second largest economy, supply chains flood up there, and we saw the disruption last year during COVID, right? When the whole supply chain came to a standstill because of COVID, and everywhere there are problems and shortages in healthcare supplies and medicines, right? So what is your view on the China impact on the world? We saw them cracking down on the Alibaba group. There's been a major default by Evergrande, the construction company over there. And there's been, there are there's major news coming from there. They have a huge impact on the global economy. What is your stance on the Chinese impact on the Indian economy and the world economy broadly?
Yeah. So as I've mentioned, China has already played a major role in the global economy in terms of, I wouldn't say disrupting the supply chain, but they made supply chain extremely efficient. But what has happened in China in the last 5-6 years, it's its political assertion, right? So previously the view was, you hide your strength and bide your time, which was, look, you grow economically, don't indulge too much in political affairs. But that is no longer the case. The leadership in China today wants to interfere not only at the global level, but also at the local level. What might seem like a small event to you, for example, they want to regulate how many hours a Chinese can play in terms of video game, right? I don't know if you're aware of that. So this social transformation that China is talking about is actually very, very real. We are not talking about economic engineering, we're talking about social engineering. Now, for India, it is extremely, I would say, we are in a very fragile state, because what is not very clear cut is what exactly is the political relationship or equation with China. Now, as an economist, I feel that it's good that we have Chinese economy growing, because then the political dispensation in India has no choice, but it has to also provide opportunities in India to grow, because if you don't grow, and with political changes happening in China, it's not very clear cut that our relationship with China would be at equal terms if we don't grow and they grow at the rate that they are growing. And clearly, COVID has exposed vulnerabilities, right? So when push comes to shove, if it is between choosing India's and China and India's interest, naturally, it's not that China is going to be very generous at that point in time. And what COVID has exposed, and you can clearly see it in the vaccine strategy as well, that all countries are looking out at their interests. There is no global interest as such, right? There's no sort of what seemed like a global economic agenda, upliftment of poverty when everybody, when tides go up, then all boats would be lifted is not the case. What vaccines have exposed is that every country is to themselves. So if we have to meet the Chinese aggression, both political and economic, we have no choice but to also grow rapidly. We need to grow strategically as well. And even though the Prime Minister talked about self-reliance, to a certain extent, he was talking about certain choices we don't have. If, for example, China stops supplying certain critical inputs to us at a fair price, then we don't have choice but to be self-reliant in those sectors. So there are genuine apprehension, in my opinion, about the political changes that are happening in China, the political direction China wants to head. China is no longer talking about just being an economic superpower. It wants to be a political superpower. It is aggressive in the region. We have seen what it can do in the Southeast Asian, in the South China Sea region. It is exerting itself, and we do have to rise up to the challenge. And I think the biggest challenge for us is to rise up economically, right? Politically, I would imagine that we are stable. We have a stable democracy. People don't have extremist views in the country. We might have a few fringe elements here and there, but by and large, we Indians have a level head. We are level-headed people. We are very welcoming. We sort of have a very, very broad-minded approach. But economically, we need to grow. We don't have a choice. There has to be emphasis on the economy if we have to rise to the challenge of China. Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm going to take one last question. I know we are significantly over time, but I still want to take this very interesting question. This is by Rishi, who's asking on your view on the temple and culture-based economy that India used to have in the ancient and medieval era. And if that's the way for India to go in the future, right? Is it possible for India to go back to that kind of cultural and medieval, temple-based economy that we used to have and avoid the whole effects of globalization and slowdown, which is caused by the global disruption or disturbance?
This is an interesting question, and let me answer it. That you see, one of the greatest transformation that has happened, and India has embraced it itself, is the evolution of market society, right? When a lot of people think of industrial revolution as a technological change, but to be very honest, in my view, it is not at all a technological change. It was actually a whole philosophical change in the way we approach life itself, right? So industrial revolution was not only a technological revolution, but it was an idea which sort of planted itself as a market society. And what is market society? Market society is basically every aspect of human behavior is up for sale, right? Now, when you talk about a temple-based economy, you see, when we had a temple-based economy, large part of the organization and economy was based on traditions and customs that were put in place, right? Who could be a trader? Who could do this activity? Who could do that activity? What could you consume? Who could drink water from which well? And, there was sort of customs put in place which sort of regulated our activities. And unfortunately, or fortunately, those times have changed completely, right? We are today a market society. I mean, if your question essentially is that should we ideally move back, the question is who will move us back there? I mean, as an individual, for example, I can become more traditional, limit my consumption, which is what, in fact, the church urges people in light of climate change and global issues. The church is urging Christians, for example, to limit their consumption, right? But the question essentially is that those would be very appealing 400, 500 years ago, when church actually had a major hold on the economic lives of people. But today, unfortunately, they don't have that hold on the lives of the people. We have become a market society. Now, would I like to go back? I think when I look at the market society, I can, of course, discuss the pros and cons, but some of the benefits I must add. For example, today, when we talk about access to healthcare, you look at life expectancy, it's gone up very significantly. Our ability to fight diseases has gone up very significant, has sort of, the scientific advancements that we have made have gone up very significantly. Comforts, I visited, for example, I visit palaces, and I compare, the kind of light and electricity those palaces had versus the light and electricity I have access to. I feel that I'm much better off than a king 100, 200 years ago. For example, the revolution in the ability to read books. Books have become cheaper. Literature has become lot easier to access. So the ability to have a wholesome life has significantly gone up today for a larger number of people than it was under customary time. But keep in mind, because whenever we talk about temple economy, it's not about the temple economy, that ideological view which is attractive. What bothers me greatly is, who are the people who will be regulating the temple economy? What would their incentives be? And very often, my fear is that because those will be men, they will not be angels, there will be a great deal of perversion. We might go back to the dark ages where discrimination is rampant, power seeking is rampant. So that's my only fear. Market society naturally has its own challenges, I think, but I'm more confident that we will be able to resolve them. We are in a better place to resolve those conflicts than actually going back, because I know what the effects of going back would be historically.
That's very interesting, and very interesting viewpoints over there. At this point, I know there are more questions coming in for you, but given the paucity of time we have, we'll have to stop taking those questions now. Okay. And I want to take a minute to thank you, Professor Kapoor. Thank you for doing this session. Extremely insightful. To the audience, the session is not yet over. We are still going to speak with Mr. Narottam Kishore, who's the head of admissions at BITSoM. So we are still going to talk about the whole program, the school as well. But I want to take a minute to thank Professor Kapoor for doing this session, doing this interaction, being extremely insightful. And if you are looking for more such insightful talks and experiences, you know where to go, you know where he teaches, and that is, now we are going to talk about how you can get over there. So thank you, Professor Kapoor. Thank you for taking out the time today evening, and we look forward to staying in touch with you.
So thank you very much. I look forward to interacting with the students in future as well. So thank you very much, Sanjay, Narottam, and Sampurna as well.
Absolutely. Have a good evening.
Yes, have a good evening too.
Now, on that note, let me invite Narottam Kishore, who is the head of admissions at BITSoM. Narottam is also an alumnus of SRCC. He's an alumnus of the Indian School of Business, Hyderabad. And in his previous role, prior to becoming the head of admissions at BITSoM, he was the associate director of admissions at the Indian School of Business, ISB, Hyderabad. So let me hand it over to Narottam to tell you a little more about the key highlights of the BIT School of Management, and then we'll take more questions from, we'll ask him some questions about the school and the program as well. Over to you, Narottam.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Before I begin, let me share my screen.
Sure.
All right, before I begin, I just wanted to share an anecdote of Professor Mudit Kapoor, because he taught me when I was at ISB as a student in the year 2008 and 9. He taught me global economics, and one of the topics that he touched in one of the sessions was that why corruption is good for the society. And it was kind of surprising to all of us that somebody is kind of proving that why corruption is good for the society. And we were like kind of convinced that no, he cannot go ahead and prove it, because corruption, we all know, is bad for the society. But he went on and proved, using that law of demand, law of supply curve, that why corruption is good. And that session is still fresh in my mind. I still can recollect what he taught in that class, and the same kind of experience I had by attending today's session. So all I wanted to say, thank you to Professor Mudit, the way he went on to teach me when I was a student of ISB Hyderabad, and now also the topic that he chose was truly enlightening for all of us. So that's the power of teaching. Like the kind of, when you interact with the top quality professor, you get a lot of aha moments, and that's what you can expect being part of BIT School of Management, because that's something I'm going to talk about, that why you want to consider BIT School of Management if you're planning to pursue your master's education next year, or maybe a year down the line. If you want to consider BIT School of Management or any master's program, you may want to consider BIT School of Management. And I want to present that pitch in the next 10 minutes. So it's an MBA program, and this MBA program is coming from BITS Pilani. Now, we all know that BITS Pilani has 4 campuses. One is Pilani, second Hyderabad, third Goa, and fourth in Dubai. But now it has come with the 5th campus, which is in Mumbai. And this 5th campus in Mumbai is purely management education. Till date, BITS Pilani had engineering education, but now we are bringing management education with a campus in Mumbai. And that's what this MBA is about. And when you complete this program, you get an MBA degree. You get an MBA degree from BITS Pilani. So you become part of BITS Pilani alumni community, become part of BITS Pilani community. So that's a pedigree that you come from. So that's a brand you will get once you complete your MBA from BITSoM. It's a full-time program. It's a 2-year residential program, which means that you have to stay in Mumbai. You have to stay in the accommodation that we provide. And that's how you complete this 2-year MBA program. So that's a brief about BITSoM MBA. Now, what are the key distinguishing features of this institute? Now, one of the top things that we are bringing is this global faculty. Now, most of the courses that will be taught by visiting faculty. So faculty coming from Kellogg School of Management, faculty coming from Wharton Business School or Singapore Management University, they will be coming and teaching one particular course. So Mark Mead, for example, will teach accountancy. He will be teaching accountancy course. Similarly, Gerard George, he will be teaching entrepreneurship. Similarly, then Louis Martin, coming from University of Texas and Austin, he'll be teaching organizational behavior. So most of the faculty that we're teaching, and Professor Mudit Kapoor will be one of the faculty, he will also be teaching economics to the students of BITSoM, and that's what you can expect, the kind of learning, the kind of knowledge that you get being part of this class will be truly exceptional. And I myself have experienced it because I was a student at ISB and I've studied under some of these faculty, and they have been truly world class, and you can expect the same kind of learning by being part of it.
I'm gonna jump in over here for a second. So being an ISB alumnus, I have also been taught by a few of them, and I would really want to call out for Professor Piyush Kumar. He teaches marketing services at ISB. I've taken that course twice, by the way, because I loved it so much that I took it as a student first and then took it later as an admissions officer at ISB. I took it for the second time in 2016. He's just brilliant. Same with Professor Rajagopal Raghunathan. He's called the Happiness Professor. So to the audience, you can find his courses, you can find his happiness course on Coursera, which possibly millions of students have taken so far. Amazingly outstanding. Same with Professor Nirmalya Kumar and Abhijit Vadera. Abhijit Vadera taught negotiations to me, and that rule on how to do negotiations still sticks with me. So some amazing faculty over there. Please, Narottam, please go ahead. I just wanted to call this out.
Thank you, Sanjay. And then again, we have a few more faculty, Shamika Ravi, Z Catalan, he will be teaching operations management from Wharton Business School. So again, the kind of faculty they were bringing, they'll be the top class faculty, and the kind of faculty that you get when you go to abroad, when you go to US or Europe and study under those top faculty, they will be coming and teaching you by being in Mumbai. So you get a great exposure, great learning by being part of this BITSoM MBA program. Now we have 5 specializations. In the second year, you will be given option to complete a specialization. So as of now, we have this 5 specializations. 1 is entrepreneurship, 2nd is finance, 3rd is e-commerce, 4th is leadership, and 5th is marketing. Now you have option to choose 2 specializations. You can complete 2 specializations in the second year. So you can do either marketing and finance, or you can do leadership and entrepreneurship. So minimum is 1, and maximum is 2 specializations that you can complete in the second year. So that's about specialization in the curriculum. We have this collaboration with London Business School, and as part of this collaboration, you have opportunity to spend 2 weeks in London at London Business School. So as a part of this immersion program, you will be spending 2 weeks in London, and you'll be studying under some of the top faculty of London Business School. You'll also be interacting with some corporates, you'll be interacting with the entrepreneurs at London, and you will be also meeting with LBS MBA students. That kind of program that we've designed for our MBA students. And that's integral part of the component, which happens in the second year by being part of this collaboration. And you get the opportunity to spend 2 weeks at London Business School in your second year. So that's another key feature of our curriculum. Now, we have this career support, which means placement. As a placement, we have this dedicated team, or career advancement team, and they will be helping you in getting internships. They will be helping you getting final placements. And this team will also be taking care of your mentorship. So in terms of providing some guidance, what kind of career you want to choose after you're completing your MBA program. They will be facilitating case study or B-plan competitions. They will be helping you getting summer internships in the sense that companies will be coming on campus and they're posting JDs and you'll be applying for those JDs. So those summer internships as well as final placement, that will be offered. And of course, you'll also have this live projects, which means that you get a chance to work with a company while you are completing the first year and second year. You get a chance to work with a company while you're based on campus. So you get a live projects, some kind of problem statement for a company, and you form a team and kind of find the solution and you give those insights to the companies. That's part of live projects. So basically, you're applying whatever is taught in the classroom you're applying those concepts and principles on those live projects that is given by a particular company. So those kind of networking, those kind of network you'll be building at BITSoM, because we have this strong dedicated team of career advancement team, and they will make sure that you have a great start to your career after you graduate from this program. Now, I want to touch upon internships. In the month of October, we started a summer internship for the founding class, and these are the kind of companies which came and hired as students. So we have top consulting companies, Bain & Company, or Arthur D. Little, Kearney, they all came and recruited some of our students for the summer internship program. Similarly, from FMCG, you have HUL and Nestle, they participated and they took people for the summer internship. And similarly, go on to Aditya Birla Group and other top consulting groups like EY, PwC, KPMG, Deloitte, they all participated in our summer internship. And we are very much confident the same company will be coming on final placements. So our final placement will begin next year, 2022, in the month of November, and we expect the same kind of companies coming. So you can have a great start to your career because the kind of companies coming up for internships as well as final placements. These are the top companies where you would like to start your career, and that they give you a great platform to build your career. So you can expect great placement, great career opportunities by being part of this MBA program. So our campus currently is at Hiranandani Knowledge Park. That's in Powai. If you are in Mumbai, you can visit our Powai campus. You can come to our Powai campus and meet us. We'll be happy to interact with you. And at present, this is a few pictures of our campus in Powai, Mumbai. Now, this is an interim campus. This is a temporary campus. Our permanent campus will be coming in Kalyan region. Kalyan is 30 kilometers away from main city, Mumbai. And that's permanent campus will be coming up. And that campus will be coming up in the year 2023. So most likely in the second year when you graduate, so when you enter into the class of 2022, second year, some part of your second year you'll be spending a new campus, which is Kalyan. And that's a big campus that's coming up. And that's where you can expect BITSoM campus to be. But as of now, the first 2-3 years, we are having this campus at Hiranandani Knowledge Park in Powai region, Mumbai, and that's where you can start. You can have at least your next year, 2022, you'll have classes from this campus. And it's a state-of-the-art infrastructure, which means we have all the state-of-the-art facilities available to you to have great learning, and you can have a great time at this campus also. Now, I want to touch upon a few figures of our founding class. We were able to have a founding class of 139 students. We started our founding class in the month of July 2021. And these are like our average figure in terms of average CAT score was 94, average GMAT was 680, average GRE was 316. And considering this was a founding class, we are very proud of this fact that we are able to get students from top quality educational institutions. So we have students from IIT Madras, IIT Roorkee, BITS Pilani, NMIMS, or so on. Similarly, we have students from global institutions like University of Warwick, New York University, and Penn State University. And in terms of diversity, we have men 65% and women 35%. So that's a brief overview of a founding class. And the reason I want to share that you will have this class in which your peers will be top achievers, and you can have a great peer learning by being part of this. So next year also, we have this class size of 150 students. That's the maximum class size we'll have. So you have a small cohort, and that small cohort and the kind of learning that you're getting these top quality processes. So you're going to have great learning by being part of this small cohort, and that's one of the features that a lot of people like by coming to this founding class of BITSoM MBA. In terms of our age profile, maximum people, 2/3 of people coming from 22 to 25 years of age bracket, and about 50% of the class is coming in terms of work experience. 50% class is 0 to 2 years of work experience. And again, we do have 1/3 of the class between 2 to 4 years of work experience. So if you're in the range of 0 to 4 years, probably this MBA is a sweet spot for you, because you got a good chance of getting an admit if you're in this range of 0 to 4 years of work experience. Now, what is the application requirement? What does it take to apply to this MBA program? So, two things. One, you need to have a bachelor's degree, and if you're in a final year of your undergrad, you are eligible to apply. That's one. And second is you should have taken either CAT test in 2021, which is scheduled this month of November. In November 28th, that's a test that many people will be taking. So that's one thing. So if you're not taking CAT, then you should have taken either GMAT or GRE test. So if you've taken CAT 2021 test, or you have taken GMAT or GRE in the last 5 years, then you are eligible to apply to this MBA program. Now, what is the application form? What are the different components of the application form? One is, so what are the 6 things that we look at when we evaluate applications? So 6 things that we look at is academics. What is your class 12 undergrad academic record? What is your CAT, GMAT, or GRE test? Third, what we look at is achievement, any extracurriculars. We also look at your essays, because there are 3 essays that we ask you to write in your application form. So we look at your essays. Then work experience. Although work experience is not so mandatory, but if you have work experience, do mention it, because it has certain weightage in the application evaluation. And then finally, one letter of recommendation from your maybe faculty, or if you're working, then your supervisor, current supervisor, or previous supervisor. So these are the 6 components that we're looking in the application form. Okay, in terms of timelines, our round 1 deadline is 21st of November. That's when, so if you're willing to apply by 21st November, you can go ahead and apply. But if you think that it's too early, then we'll have round 2 application deadline, which is coming up 23rd of January. So you can apply by 23rd of January also, because that's when round 2 application deadline will be deadline is. And our class will begin 4th of July 2022. That's when we expect you to be in Mumbai, and the classes will happen at Mumbai campus, in Hawaii campus, and that's where the faculty will be coming from different part of the globe, and they will be teaching you in a classroom setting. We know that with 21st of November is the application deadline, but if you have taken enroll for CAT or GMAT or GRE test, then you can submit your test score by March 20th. And once you submit your test score, then we consider your application complete. And that's when application is evaluated after you submit each and every aspect of the application. To know more about us, you can visit our website, bitsom.edu.in. To interact with one of our team members, counselors, you can call on this number. And if you want to get your profile evaluated, if you want to understand how you can make your application stronger, or how you can strengthen your chance of getting admit to BITSoM, you can send us an email at admissions@bitsom.edu.in. One of our team members will get back to you and help you, guide you about how to submit a strong application. So that's that. I would encourage you to reach out to us, have a connect with us, because we have dedicated people who can help you submit a stronger application if you are deciding or if you're planning to apply to BITSoM MBA in the next academic year. So that was my short presentation. If you have any questions, Sanjay, you can pick up a few questions, and I'll be happy to answer those questions.
Sure. I am going to ask at least one question. I know we are slightly over time, but I still want to take a few minutes to discuss the scholarships. But before we get into that, I want to run a quick poll with the audience. So audience, you can see the poll being visible on your screen right now. The question is, which factor influences your decision the most? So which factor about the school plays the most important role in your choice of B school? So what factor would play a role when you are looking at evaluating various MBA programs or various B schools where you can possibly study? Is it the ranking that's most important to you? Is it the faculty and the curriculum that is being covered, or the specializations offered? Those are the most important for you. Is it the track record of career services, employment opportunities that the school has been able to generate, the location, or is the accreditation and the partnerships, or any other factors that play the most important role in your decision making? Okay, interesting. I see some responses have come in. I'm going to keep this poll open for another 10 seconds. So if you haven't yet responded, please do so very quickly. And then we are going to discuss with Narottam about the possible scholarship opportunities that you can get at BITSoM if you decide to apply and get admitted to the program? Okay, I see around, okay, majority of people have responded. I still see the responses coming in, so I'm going to wait for another 5-6 seconds. Give the chance to everyone to respond, and then we'll talk about the scholarship opportunities as well. All right, with that, I am going to. All right, people are still responding, so I still want to give them some 10 seconds to do this. All right, very quickly now, and I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so Narottam, very interestingly, ranking plays the most important factor for our audience. Then it's the faculty curriculum, employment track record, location, and so on and so forth. So interesting perspective over there. Narottam, I remember we discussed about that some students at BITSoM do end up getting a scholarship. Can you also tell the audience what they need to do to possibly secure that coveted scholarship at BITSoM?
Sure. So we do have quite a generous scholarship policy at BITSoM, especially since we are we are founding class or we are initial years of our institution. We do have a generous scholarship policy. So I want to talk about what are 3 different scholarship criteria that we have. So first we have is merit scholarship. So for merit scholarship, you just have to apply, and you come across on top of the merit list, then school will offer you scholarship in the range of 20% to 100%. It can go up to 100%. Some of the students in the founding class have got 100% scholarship. But yes, it can range from 20% to 100%. So that's merit scholarship. You don't have to apply. You just submit your application. And application is strong enough. You come on the top of the merit list, you get merit scholarship. That's one. Second is women's scholarship. So to promote women students in our school, we have this women's scholarship. Again, you don't have to apply. You submit your application, and your application comes to the top of the merit list. By being part of the women, BITSoM offers women's scholarship, and again, the amount ranges from 20% to 100%. Again, we have 2 students in our founding class who got 100% tuition waiver by being part of the BITSoM MBA program. So that's women's scholarship, second scholarship that we have. Now, the third scholarship is merit cum need scholarship. Now, merit cum need scholarship, that's where the large amount of the scholarship grant that is available for students, which means that for merit cum need scholarship, you have to apply in the application. So in the application form, there's a field which asks you how do you plan to fund your MBA program, and if you click an option scholarship, then this application then asks you to write an essay that why admission committee should consider giving a scholarship. And basically, you want to then highlight the fact that how you coming to the class will add value to the classroom, how you can add value to the peer learning. So basically, you have to talk about how you coming into the classroom will help all your peer mates learn from you. So basically, that's what you're looking at, people who are coming and they're adding a lot of value. And if you're able to convince your AdCom with your essays, then admission committee go ahead and offer you merit cum need scholarship. Again, merit cum need scholarship ranges from 20% to 100% of tuition fee. So these are 3 categories for merit scholarship. For women's scholarship, you don't have to apply, you just submit the application. And if our AdCom find your application strong enough, you get scholarship. But if you want to apply, I would suggest you to choose merit cum need scholarship. In the application form itself, there is a component scholarship criteria, scholarship. Once you pick that, you have to write an essay. And once you write an essay, you submit the application. And then the AdCom scholarship committee take a look at your application form, and then they take a call who to give scholarship. Now, having said that, in the founding class, we do have around 40% of people who got some kind of scholarship, either merit scholarship, women's scholarship, or merit cum need scholarship. So that's good amount of percentage of the class, about 40% of the class getting scholarship. So yeah, if you're looking for scholarship, you go ahead and apply to BITSoM, and there's a strong chance, because as I said, it's an initial year of institution. You get a lot of benefits because we want you to succeed, school wants you to succeed, and that's why we make sure that you get best of the people in the class, and those best people will succeed after they graduate from the class. You get a lot of attention, and that's the beauty of being part of the initial years of any institution. A small cohort and this global faculty which is coming can have great learning, great experience by being part of this program.
Interesting. Narottam, my last question, and I know we are over time, so in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you this one very last, very important question. So a lot of our audience comes from these top undergraduate institutions in India, right? These are people from the top IITs, the top non-engineering colleges, NITs, BITS institutions, so on and so forth. Why should this audience, what according to you are the top 3 reasons why these people should be looking at BITSoM as their target MBA school. It's a new institution, just been 1 year, first cohort is in now. Why should these people be looking at BITSoM and not the other options that are available out there for them?
Yeah, so biggest factor that I won't talk about, it's a small cohort of 150 students. Now, if any of the top MBA programs that you go, you will never find small cohort of 150 students. You'll have a cohort, size of 400 plus or even 900 students. That's where, and you get lost in that crowd. But here you have just 150 students. So small cohort size, and again, they are being taught by top faculties of the world. And the reason why I'm insisting on the faculty that I myself have been a student of IB, and I've studied under some of these faculty, and the same faculty will be teaching you because they will come from B schools across the world. They'll be teaching you. So the kind of learning, the kind of curriculum that it has, it's a new curriculum. The curriculum is meeting with industry requirement, and the very fact that small cohort, you get a lot of personal attention, not only from the faculty but also from the school. And we want you to succeed because as you do well after you graduate from this program, you are able to build the brand of BITSoM MBA. And so school, make sure that you do well, not only in your internship, but also once you graduate from the program, because it's an interest. It's in our interest that you succeed, because when you succeed, school succeed and all that. So with a small cohort, a lot of personal attention will be given to you, and that you can a lot of the kind of experience that can go through will be truly exceptional. And that's one of the insight we got, because we conducted a survey among the founding class, and we asked them what were the 3 key factors that they considered before they went and applied to BITSoM. And there were three factors. Those 3 factors were the career opportunities, placements, because they felt that school will make sure that they can have great start with career, because any new institution, they put a lot of emphasis to make sure that students succeed. That's first option. First factor that they picked was career opportunities, the placement that the school will provide. That was one. Second option that they put was the faculty. They said the kind of faculty that they're getting into the class is these are top class faculty, and you get, if you go to US, if you go to Europe, you get the same kind of faculty who will be coming and teaching. So kind of learning the kind of curriculum that you go through the top class. And the third was small cohort size, because the small cohort size gives them a lot of personal attention. That's what we can guarantee, that we are having classes like 1 students, and you can get a lot of personal attention from the our placement team, can get a lot of personal attention from our faculty, you can get a lot of attention from the school, and they will make sure that you're able to achieve what you aspire to achieve after you graduate. So these 3 factors, I would say, it's the career opportunities that will provide, is the faculty and the small cohort size that can give you a great start to your career after you graduate.
So a small cohort, but still a really large alumni base, because they become part of the BITS Pilani alumni community. Is that correct? So
absolutely,
the whole
so that's
alumni
something.
network
Yeah,
of
I'm just
55,000.
saying that because you become part of BITS Pilani community. So you become because the MBA degree that you get from BITS Pilani, which automatically gives you access to entire BITS Pilani alumni community, and BITS Pilani alumni community is 55,000. So become part of that community, and then that itself help you build your network, and that can help you career after you graduate in this program. Because being part of the alumni community is a great platform. They could reach out to top people in any industry, because BITS Pilani is there for the last 50-55 years.
All right, great. So with that, we are sharp on time. It's 8:29 now, so I would want to take a minute to wrap up this session. I want to thank the audience for joining and being the patient audience. I hope you found the session useful and interesting. We surely enjoyed, I personally really enjoyed hearing from Professor Kapoor, extremely insightful chat from him. So really enjoyed hosting this session as well. And I also want to thank you, Narottam, for taking out the time and allowing us to host this session and be a facilitator in this session. I'm quite sure the audience enjoyed hearing about, or found it insightful to hear about BITS School of Management. It's a new institution and possibly a great opportunity for some of them to get into a really emerging tier 1 business school in the city of Mumbai. So thank you again for doing this session. And thank you again to the audience. It's been a pleasure hosting you today. All of you have a good night. Take care.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.